Brad, I got to tell you, man, like, and you knew this was kind of going to be the case. The longer we went in the season, the closer to week 17 or the week 14 we got, the closer to the end of the season, the more I thought we would have our Macho Man Randy Savage, the cream raises to the top, yeah, format. There's nothing that jumps off the page as a misfire to me here. I think when you combine results, strength of schedule, where teams are in their conferences, etc., honestly, 1 through 15, I'm pretty good with. I don't really see anything that jumps off the page as a misfire here.
No, I don't really either. I don't think there was much of a cat out of the bag, jack out of the box kind of surprise moment that grabbed people's attention. They're like, "Ooh, you got to be kidding me!" All right, and started warning any kind of conversation. I think it kind of more or less went by the book. What we all anticipated and expected. I can tell you this: if it did shake out this way, and again, we still got a couple of weeks left before we see the final pairings of that Notre Dame Oklahoma game. An 8-9, oh, baby, it'd be a dandy. Same would be for Oregon and Alabama. I would definitely sit my butt on the couch and absorb every single second of that for all 3.5 hours of both of those affairs. Candidly, I think Ole Miss would wax Miami in a 6-11, and Texas Tech would destroy Tulane. I think Texas Tech is a team that very few people are talking about on the national scene. You might say, well, Evans are number 5 in this latest pecking order in the college football playoff, but there's not been a whole lot of fanfare around them. Maybe they're not the sexiest, but they have right now, if you look at all the advanced metrics, that are available, whether on Pro Football Focus, College Football Graphs, whether it's EPA data, PFF's efficiency data, they're elite defensively. You could argue they're right there with the Ohio State as being almost like a 1A, 1B scenario in terms of the best defenses in all of college football. And they ain't too shabby either when they're spinning the spirals and running the rock. So very balanced team that can push any of those big boys in the top 4. But yeah, in general, no surprises. And I will say this, my last point, BYU's game this weekend against Cincinnati, you want to talk about mammoth, you want to talk about colossal, you want to talk about must-have. That's a big one for them because that could really boost the overall resume and maybe get them off the bubble and into the field as they're one of the first 2 teams out of the latest college football playoff projection.
They are, as it stands right now, 11-12 are BYU and Utah. And of course, those teams would have to make way because the ACC and the Group of 5 champions today are not inside the top 12. And while we are in a straight seeding, you do still get the top 5 ranked conference champions, meaning that 11-12 right now would be out to make way for the ACC and Group of 5, which of course would be Miami and Tulane. Now, obviously, who goes into that Miami spot up in the air because Georgia Tech can still win that conference. Louisville can still, there are still potential winners out there in the ACC. And same with Tulane in the 12th spot. Navy is still alive. There are other teams from the G5 that are still available to go in that spot. The point is 11-12 right now, BYU and Utah would get bounced. So I think that game is absolutely enormous. I'll tell you another team came kind of hanging out in that region right now. Now, I will say, I do not think, Brad, that this team is necessarily the national championship contender that I wanted them to be. I absolutely do think they could be a team that shows up and plays. Spoiler, Vanderbilt's got one more top 25 game left ahead of them, too. Vanderbilt currently sitting at number 14. If Miami was to go, they're still in that spot. But Vanderbilt's at 14, and they are on the road at Tennessee. And I think Tennessee is a winnable game for the Vanderbilt Commodores behind Diego Pavia. This is likely going to be, because at this point, who the hell knows anymore? Diego Pavia's last game with the Doors, maybe he sues for like 8 to 10 more years of eligibility. I don't know. But if the Doors win that game, depending on what happens with BYU Cincinnati, depending on what happens with Utah down the stretch, depending on how the ACC plays out, there's still the door open for a Vanderbilt to slip in there. But that of course, means Alabama-Auburn. And again, Auburn's in a bad spot. They had to get rid of Hugh Freeze. They are looking to find out who the next coach is. But, and maybe this is me just kind of being cliche, sentimental college football guy, man, the Iron Bowl is a weird game Like the Iron Bowl is a weird game. It's a game
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
team could be 2-10 and one team 12-0, and the 2-10 team every now and then jumps up and gets that win. So that game is not necessarily out of the equation as a possible weird spot. I would look down the stretch. If we're looking at the teams that I would say are in, Brad, like knockout range, right? That is, one more loss probably gets them out. I would say, and I don't think that there is one there. I don't think, as much as I'm with you, I don't think Texas Tech is being given enough attention for what they are. And they only have one game left, which is at West Virginia. But I don't think there's any runway for Texas Tech. In fact, I would go so far. Let me put it this way. Brad, let me float a theory that I just popped into the brain and see where you are on this. Any team that is not in the SEC cannot lose another game and stay inside the Big 12 or inside the top 12 in the playoff rankings. No team outside of the SEC can lose another game, with the exception of Ohio State and Indiana, obviously at 1-2 and out of the Big 10. No other team outside of the SEC can lose another game and stay inside the 12. Is that a hot take?
No, I think I was entirely fair and on the table, quite frankly. And I'm glad you qualified it, because Ohio State and Indiana are untouchable. They're going to be in no matter what occurs. And I cannot wait for those two teams to likely clash in Indianapolis. I think it's going to be in Indianapolis this year for the Big Ten title game, because that will ultimately determine, and might be a sneak preview of what the national title game will be. So, there is a lot to shake out still with the Big Ten, but I think you're not, pulling it out of your ass. Theory that just popped into your dome a second ago is remotely outlandish. A lot of these teams are kind of teetering on the fence. It's a very small margin for error. So they just got to go out there, take care of business these last couple of weeks. And for the teams that do get another game in their conference title games, they got to go out there and win, not necessarily emphatically, just sneak by, get a 1-point victory, and solidify the overall resume. So, yeah, man, I think you're pinpoint in that overall theory that, again, just popped into your head.
Yeah, I think any team right now in the top four, Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and Georgia, they can drop one more. I think, honestly, even if Georgia was to lose one more, and don't say it's not possible, because that rambling wreck of Georgia Tech game at the end of the year is not just big, but Georgia Tech, while granted that game doesn't matter to the ACC, Georgia at 9-1 can still very much go win the ACC and get themselves in. If they do not win the ACC, a win over Georgia and finishing the year 11-1, maybe 11-2 with an ACC loss, I think that'd be enough to get Georgia Tech in. So while that game might not matter all that much to Georgia, that game may be a playoff puncher for the Rambling Right. They beat Georgia, finish 11-1 in the regular season. I don't really care what they do in the ACC title game. I think that they are a playoff team at that point. I think Georgia can drop a game, but if they do, and Georgia Tech gets that win, I think Georgia Tech becomes a top 12 team, and that might take away even more leeway for, I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think that there's a loss out there for the Oregon Ducks outside of the Big Ten championship game. I got to think that they're going to be mildly favored over USC and on the road at Washington, but both of those teams would love to knock Oregon back. I don't think there's much runway for the Ducks. Oregon or Oklahoma at number 8. They're already 8-2. Notre Dame 8-2. Alabama 8-2. I don't think any of those teams can afford a third loss in the regular season and still find their way in. I think everybody, and for the record, and this one might be the one that I don't know if it's fair to be contentious or not. Again, Texas Tech has only got the one game left. If Texas Tech loses to West Virginia, I would say 10-2 in the Big 12, Brad, probably drops Texas Tech out of the playoff 12 as well.
Yeah, that's fair. You can't lose to West Virginia. Very meek opponent, one in terms of the analytics, well outside, even the top 75, top 80 in a number of different categories. So that would be a major eyesore on the overall resume if the Mountaineers somehow fired a gun and knocked Texas Tech out. Let me throw out a question to you, because I'm curious what your response is. Tulane is the last of the non-power forward to get in as of right now. James Madison still in the conversation. Navy, you got a ticket that you revealed off air. It's a massive, 60-1 for them to make the college football playoff. I would love to see the midshipmen get in with their style of play. Just running down the throats of the old wishbone offense. That would be tremendous, and it would be great for you too, because you'd be buying the top shelf tequila and only the finest liqueurs that you would pour in your mouth as a result. But I went to College Football Graphs, and it's a great site. You can take in one team and match it up with another, and you get an instantaneous projection based on all the EPA data is out there. Right now, based on a Tulane Texas Tech matchup, Tech would win that game according to CFP Graphs 37-18. So I asked you the question, at one point, do a non-power 4 get an invitation to the college football playoff? At what point are they denied that invitation because they just simply do not match up against some of the power opponents that they are inevitably going to face?
Well, the answer that I will give as a cynical, jaded a-hole, Brad, is as soon as the SEC decides that they don't want them to. That is the correct answer to this.
Okay.
But the reality is, and we've seen this already, the SEC has made it clear that they would be perfectly happy to get rid of auto bids altogether, right? Like they would be perfectly happy to say, no auto bids. It's just the best 12 teams. And to be honest with you, this thing's going to 16 at minimum. It's going to 16. Now,
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. The Big Ten is postured and said, we'd like to talk about 20 or 24. It's posturing. The Big 12, I don't think the Big Ten wants to go to 20 or 24. I just think that when it goes to 16, they want to make sure the auto bids stay in. And I think that that's their bargaining chip because here's the reality. If there's no auto bids, the non-power 4 teams are out. They are done. They are cooked. They will not get an invitation. So for them, the only way to get a team in would be for it to go to 20 or 24 teams where they would get a team that's hanging around. How about this? Houston at 23, Tulane at 24. A 24-team tournament will get 2 teams in for the Power 4. That's the only way they'll participate without an auto bid available to them. So the SEC says none. The Big Ten is going to argue and say, we want to go to 24. It's not true. They just want to posture for the auto bid so that they know they have their setup. It's going to depend on that. If we go to 16 with an auto bid for the top 5 conference champs, you'll get 1 team in. Maybe occasionally you get like 2 11-1 or maybe a 12-0 non-conference champ and they fight their way in. But Brad, I think for any non-power teams, I think perfection is going to be the only way that they get invited to the dance moving forward. They will have to be 12-0 conference champs and naturally be ranked in the top 16 or 20 because I don't think you're going to see a lot outside past that.